Hello there guys. Today I'm going to show you what was probably one of the most enjoyable model kits I've built in a long time. I really enjoyed building this Ehrhardt armoured car. I think for me it was a perfect balance of detail and ease of build. I think in terms of detail it's almost up there with mini art kits, but in terms of ease of build it's almost up there with Tamiya, and I think that the designers have made some really good decisions with this kit. So we don't have lots of small fiddly parts when one larger part would suffice. And equally, although it's not ideal for everyone, parts that are not going to be seen, like the engine, are not included. As a result, I found this really rewarding, and I put the whole thing together in just 2 evenings. As we can see from the side of the box, we've got a number of paint schemes. There's only 4 shown here, but we do have a few more in the instruction manual. We also have this really strong inner cardboard box, which is super helpful. And I just feel like every part of this kit really does shout quality. So even the instruction manual is a really decent size, really good quality paper. It's got a nice background of the vehicle itself, and it's got a few reference photos in here as well. Several of which I haven't been able to find online, so these are incredibly useful. In that regard, it does remind me a little bit of the instructions for the Wingnut Wings kits. You can see from the sprue map here how comparatively simple this kit is. Sprues A through to D with 2 Ds, and then a clear part sprue. I shouldn't bang on too much about how simple the kit is though, because on the very first step I made a schoolboy error and snipped off one of the location tabs from this transmission cover, thinking that it was a sprue attachment point. That didn't cause too much harm though. It simply meant instead of using the tab to locate this, I had to put the drive shaft in place and use that to get the distance correct. These beams which make up the side of the chassis are the perfect example of what I mean by simplified design. They're just one single piece. I can imagine many other manufacturers would do that as 5, 6, 7, 8 separate pieces there, but this just slots on perfectly. There are some ejector pins inside it, but you are never going to see those on the inside faces. Unless you're going to model this on its side or upside down, they're going to be invisible. So a lot of the process of building this chassis reminded me of building the Mini Art Omnibus, which I built a while ago. There definitely doesn't seem to be quite as much detail on here as that, but there also aren't those tiny thin parts which you break in half when you cut from the sprue, and so on. So for me, it's a nice compromise. The fine detail there on the moulding for the radiator is absolutely gorgeous. The chassis is designed so that both the front and the rear axles can snap into place, and the flexibility of those parts that haven't been glued yet allow that to go in easily. I do believe, although I haven't seen it for sale, that there is a photo etched detail up set available for this, if you want to add any extra details. And there we go, there is the completed chassis with the underside detail. Very cool looking. And here is the top side. As you can see, there are quite a few ejector pin marks on that, and that block there is for the driver's seat. The side panels, including the engine cover, are just a single piece, and they've got that nice groove in there to allow them to snap perfectly into place on the side of the chassis. We do have a front and a rear door that can be opened, as well as all of the windows. So of course if you wanted to display the interior, you would need to sand down those ejector pin marks and fill them. We don't get much in the way of interior, simply that block that the driver will sit on, and a steering wheel and a couple of pedals. That said, I'm not sure how much of an interior there would be in here. There are a couple of videos on YouTube that show a restored vehicle, and the interior is similarly empty. In fact, they have modern chairs in place for the driver. I also think if you wanted to show the interior, you could quite easily cut a sheet of very thin styrene and just lay it over the top of the floor. Each of the windows has these small tabs around the side and the top, which will stop the shutters from falling inwards. You can and probably should remove those, as the instructions suggest, if you want to pose those windows open. We also get 4 machine guns which can be in various positions, including the front, the side, the rear and the turret. I decided that apart from the windows with the machine guns and the driver's hatch, all the other windows would be closed. The hatches on the side and the top of the engine just snap into place. You can pose them open, but again there is no engine inside. For me that's absolutely fine. I know some people prefer to build the engine even if it's not on display, but for me I've got no problem leaving that space empty. Initially I wasn't going to glue both of the sides in place because I wanted to paint the interior first. But upon reflection I thought I could still get my airbrush in there, and I thought it was more important to get everything squared up nicely, ready for the roof. The roof was the only part I had a fit issue with on this kit. No matter how I put it on, I always found there was about a millimetre gap at one end. It also wasn't 100% clear whether the roof is symmetrical from front to back. It looks like it is, but one of the mating edges is much more angled, much more beveled than the other. And it's the one that wasn't really beveled where the gap would appear. I chose to have the gap at the rear. It's not a major issue, and as I said, it was the only time I encountered such an issue on this kit. We get a couple of options for the armour for the radiator, either open or closed. I really liked the detail on the radiator, so I posed mine open, although I didn't put this kit in until much later because of course we needed to paint the radiator first. Once the sides are in place, we can start to put on things like the mud guards. These have really nice strong attachment points, further bolstered by having the headlight enclosure attached to both them and the side of the vehicle. We can't attach the rear wheel covers just yet though, because if we do we need to put the wheels on, and personally I would prefer to paint those separately. But again you can see there's some really nice clear tabs there for guiding those into place. Actually I've just realised that I told a fib earlier. The roof was not the only place that I had the fit issue. The turret was a bit of a pain as well. The 4 quarters of the turret go into place on the circular top panel, nice and easily, and presumably those parts are broken up on natural panel lines. But the real pain was getting this circular turret into the hole on the roof. It was always a little bit out, and although at one point I did manage to force it in, that was causing the turret sides not to be quite vertical, which was causing them to pop out at the top. So instead I built the turret separately, and then I simply cut away with a knife a little bit on the inside of the roof to make the aperture slightly wider. I left a lot of the smaller details such as the handles on the hatches off until later in the build process. And then we get a number of options in terms of stowage boxes and running boards and ditching boards and so on. We do get a guide to those in the painting instructions, but of course there are so few reference photos that essentially any combination will go. And then after just 2 evenings my model was ready for some primer. And here are the sub-assemblies that I have so far. As you can see I've glued the rear door shut, but I will have the front door open. Copper State models do produce a seated figure which I think would look quite good in that gap there, and block a bit of access to the interior as well, so you can't quite see how empty it is. I found it is quite hard to get hold of the Copper State model figures, but I do have a source for them I believe. By my count the manual has 14 different colour schemes. Many of those are single colour schemes, either solid grey or grey-green, but even then there's a great range of marking options, and it covers World War I use and interwar use by the Russians, by the Germans and by the Polish forces. I always like a good camouflage scheme, so I'm likely to go for one of these 2 options here. This is a version which was stationed in Ukraine, summer 1918, And the other option, although it's a slightly different camouflage scheme with a fourth colour, is actually also from Ukraine 1918. But yes, plenty of options there, and of course many of them do cross-reference to those photos at the beginning of the instructions. So there we go guys, just a build for today, no painting. But it really was a fun build, as I've said. I can really see myself buying another Copper State Models kit in the near future. And their models do tend to be World War I and interwar subjects, so quite uncommon, quite unusual, and always something that I'm interested in building. So let me know, have you tried any Copper State Models kits yet? Did you enjoy the build video, and which scheme would you go for? I would like to say thank you all for watching, and special thanks to my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. And welcome to Mike A, who is my latest Patreon member. Thank you very much guys, your support is hugely appreciated. I will be back next week with another video, and until then, have fun modelling.